Kevin said with a smile. Time for me to go. Wait, Officer Emmett said as she struggled to stand up, but she was feeling too sleepy. You're safe, and the grave robbery case has been solved. You know how to reach me if you need a statement. Do I really need to stay? Kevin asked. I'm not asking you to make a statement. I'm asking you to take me home, Officer Emmett said slowly. She wasn't feeling much like talking anymore. Why me? Help just arrived. Don't you want to go with them? Kevin asked in confusion. Don't worry about it. Can you please do this for me? She asked quietly. She didn't want to admit to Kevin that she was embarrassed for letting the gang of robbers get the best of her. She'd never be able to live it down, and it could undermine her authority at the precinct. I guess I could take you home. Kevin asked her. Do you think you could carry me? Emmett asked him. Her voice was barely audible. Kevin nodded and waited for the officers to arrive. Officer Emmett mustered enough strength to give them their orders so they could take the men to the station for processing. Kevin supported her as they walked slowly to her car, which was parked on the street above this underground loading dock. She wasn't very heavy, so nobody suspected just how much Kevin was actually helping her. Kevin managed to get Officer Emmett home safely. He eased her into a recliner in her living room, then he sat down on the sofa and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He looked around and wondered out loud. What's the average salary in the police department these days? He knew that a house in this neighborhood cost at least $500,000. My mom bought it for me, Officer Emmett said sleepily. She paused for a moment and then asked him, I'm really curious. How did you get your strength? I could feel your power as you carried me in. Before Kevin could reply, she asked him, if you haven't gotten it through any special training, did you have any help from someone? Help? Kevin frowned. He thought of the 2 pills Cook had given him. They were supposed to help him restore his strength. Maybe they did something more. What have those pills done to me? Kevin wondered. If you don't want to tell me, I won't force you. But remember one thing. Try not to let anyone see just how much power you have. Otherwise. Officer Emmett yawned and changed the subject. Sit down and rest for a while. I'm a little tired. Then she closed her eyes and fell asleep. I can't believe she trusts me enough to let me in her home like this, Kevin thought to himself. Then he thought again about what Emmett had said. Kevin wondered about the 2 pills Cook had given him, and he quickly took out his phone and called his friend. Cook answered in his deep voice. Hi, Kevin. What's up? Mitch, I want to know what was in those pills you gave me, Kevin said directly. Let me think about it. One of them was supposed to help boost your energy levels, and the other was supposed to help you with your focus, he replied. Then he asked, why are you suddenly asking me about this? Are you having a problem because of the pills? No, don't worry. I'm fine. Kevin smiled before adding, just curious. I'll let you get back to work. Then he sent a quick text to his office to have his car dropped off around the corner from Officer Emmett's house. No explanations necessary. It's good to be the CEO, he thought. Kevin put his phone back in his pocket and looked back at Officer Emmett, who was sleeping soundly in her recliner. He sat back and looked around the room while he wondered what was going on in his body. His eyes fell on the top shelf of her bookcase. There were a lot of martial arts books, guides to natural health, but there were also a couple of old books with tattered spines. Kevin walked over and took them down. The first one he opened was a very old translation of an ancient book on training your ki, your inner power. He was surprised to find that it talked a lot about what Officer Emmett had been saying about training your internal energy. It was a quick read, maybe because of his recent improvement in his focus. Kevin put that book aside and flipped open another one. It talked about the yin and yang, negative and positive energy, and harmony, as well as some ways to make natural medications. Kevin lost track of time and read throughout the night. When Officer Emmett woke up and saw that Kevin was still there, she immediately jumped up from her chair. Why haven't you left yet? Well, you asked me to bring you back here, and then you fell asleep. How could I let you sleep alone in the living room? What if those guys have accomplices and they want to harm you? Kevin explained. Even so, it wasn't appropriate, she said, looking slightly embarrassed. It can be our little secret, Kevin said while leaning back on the sofa. He didn't look like someone who had been up all night. On the contrary, he looked very energetic. Kevin suddenly remembered the pills that Officer Emmett had been forced to swallow the day before, and he asked her, with the concern showing in his voice, How are you doing now? It was only a couple of them. I keep myself in pretty good shape, so I think I'm getting over it, she replied. I just wish I could have developed my internal energy more, like in those books you've been reading, she said as she nodded at the pile of old books that Kevin had taken down from her shelf. Oh, I'm sure it isn't all that hard, Kevin teased her. Officer Emmett raised an eyebrow. She felt that he didn't know just how long that kind of training could take. You wouldn't understand if I told you. Anyway, I think it's time for you to leave, she said impatiently. I have to go to work. Kevin just sat there with a cryptic smile on his face. Why aren't you leaving yet? Do you want me to call a squad car for you or something? Her annoyance was starting to show. I've got something here and I hope it can help you, Kevin said as he slowly took a reddish-brown pill from his pocket. Last night, Kevin had followed the instructions in the book on alternative medicine to come up with something he thought could help Officer Emmett recover more quickly. Did you use one of the herbal recipes in that book? What's it supposed to do? Officer Emmett asked. You could tell she had her doubts, but for some reason she trusted Kevin. She was tempted to try it. Kevin had spent the night reading about vitamins and natural medicine. He only knew the basics, but decided to use a recipe in one of the old books to make some herbal medications to help Officer Emmett recover. He offered her a reddish-brown pill that looked a little like the one Cook had given him. What will it do? She asked him. I'm not exactly sure, he answered. Of course, he didn't want to tell her that he'd made it using simple ingredients he found in her kitchen. You don't know? So what makes you think it can help me? She said in an exasperated tone. So are you going to take it or not? Kevin was about to take the pill back as he spoke, but she snatched it out of his hand. Officer Emmett stared at the pill in her hand. She looked at Kevin and asked him, You've already taken something like this, haven't you? That's how you got so strong. If you're not going to take it, then I'd like to have it back, Kevin said. Who said I don't want it? She tossed the pill in her mouth and swallowed it with a gulp of water. They waited anxiously for about 5 minutes. Finally, Kevin asked her, "Do you feel anything?" "I feel like I'm going to be another 5 minutes late to work," she remarked. Then she asked him, "Are you sure you followed the recipe right?" "I'm not sure. The one I took was given to me by someone else," Kevin said awkwardly as he scratched his head. It was starting to look helpless. The book sounded serious, but maybe none of the things it talked about actually worked. Just then, Kevin's phone rang. He pulled it out of his pocket, looked at the caller ID, and said, "Lily? Where are you? Hurry up and come to Grandma's. My father's back from his trip." Lily's voice sounded a little urgent. "Okay, I'll be there in a little while." Kevin hung up the phone and picked up the 2 old books. Looking at Officer Emmett, he asked her, "Do you mind if I borrow these?" She nodded and said, "Knock yourself out." Then they said goodbye and he headed out the front door. He walked around the corner and found his car. While driving across town to the Jones mansion, Kevin thought about his father-in-law. Oliver Jones had been overseas for the past few years handling family business. Grandma Jones used to dote on Oliver, but after Lily married Kevin and Oliver went overseas, Grandma gradually stopped. For some reason, Kevin felt that it wasn't a good time for Oliver to return. After driving for more than an hour, he finally arrived at the Jones family's mansion. When he saw Kevin enter, Oliver, who was sitting on a big leather chair, waved at him. "Kevin, come here. Let me take a good look at you." "Dad," Kevin said as he walked over to him with a smile. "It's been a long time. You're looking stronger," Oliver said pleasantly. Jason, who was standing nearby, sneered. "He eats at home every day and doesn't do anything. He must have gotten fat." This remark brought laughter and snickering from most of the Joneses, all except Oliver, whose smile turned into a slight frown. Grandma Jones glared at Kevin, then said to her son, "Oliver, what brings you back after all this time?" "Mom, I found a great business opportunity for the family," Oliver explained as he stood up excitedly. That's when Kevin noticed how proud Dorothy looked as she sat next to her husband. Grandma Jones asked in surprise, "What opportunity?" "Mom, I met a very powerful businessman. All I have to do is send him the amount we agreed on, and half a month later he'll be able to triple our investment," Oliver said excitedly. The family members who were in the room started discussing this with each other. One of his cousins asked him, "Oliver, you chump, what were you thinking?" Some of the other comments were even worse, but Oliver didn't care what they said. He never lost his smile. He handed his phone to Grandma Jones and reassured her. "Mom, take a look. This is the transfer record between me and my friend." After Grandma Jones saw the financial report, she passed Oliver's phone around the room for everyone to see for themselves. The transfer record showed that as long as Oliver Jones invested a certain sum of money every time, he would receive 3 times that amount after 10 days. One of his nephews asked him, "Uncle Oliver, you aren't laundering money or something, are you?" But everyone knew he was an honest man, and the accounts looked genuine. Grandma Jones slapped the table next to her. "Oliver, it's not that I don't trust you, but our family's business isn't doing that well right now. The most I could give you is $90 million. As you know, it would be wise to watch this investment over time. I think we should be more patient," Grandma Jones said hesitantly. "Mom, this friend of mine is doing development overseas. He's focusing on some real cutting-edge industries. I guarantee that we'll earn a lot of money from this," he said confidently. Then he added, "If we hesitate, he may look for a new partner. It would be a shame for us to miss out on such a fantastic opportunity." Kevin stood up and said, "Dad, I think you should go and check on your friend." Dorothy immediately reprimanded Kevin. "What are you talking about? How can you interrupt your dad when he's speaking? If you don't understand what we're talking about, just sit there with your mouth shut." Dorothy still couldn't bear to look at Kevin, and she was disappointed that Lily refused to divorce him. "Mom, I'm telling the truth, and Dad didn't say exactly what his friend would do with the money. If we invest everything we have, we stand to lose a lot," Kevin explained very seriously. As usual, the rest of the Jones family started criticizing him one after another, saying things like, "Just go home, you don't belong here," and "You don't know what you're talking about." Then Lily whispered to Kevin, "Stop it, Kevin. Dad's finally home again. What if you make him angry?" "Lily, what do you think of Dad's deal with his friend?" Kevin asked gravely. "Of course I don't believe it, Kevin, but we need to support him," Lily pleaded. She didn't know what else to say. And she really didn't believe that anyone would offer her father such a good investment, even his best friend. It had to be a scam, but she just couldn't get herself to disagree with him, especially in front of the entire family. Grandma Jones didn't pay any attention to Kevin's objections. Her eyes lit up and she stared at Oliver and thought about all the money they could make. Grandma Jones finally let out a breath as if she had made up her mind and said, "Oliver, why don't we invest $5 million first?" "Mom, what are you talking about? We aren't some tiny little unknown family. We're one of the most respected families in all of Chicago. If I only invest $5 million, my friend will think that we're not committed," Oliver implored. "He put our family at the top of his list because of our reputation. If we don't show the same faith in him, we may lose the entire deal." They all agreed with him. Nobody wanted to risk being passed over because they were being stingy. They had to commit more than $5 million. "Then how much do you think our family should invest in this opportunity?" Grandma Jones asked him. Oliver heard her and immediately became excited. "Mom, I think we should invest more. We should invest all available funds. Then once we've made enough profit, we can pull back." When Oliver said this, none of the Joneses knew what to do. Even Grandma Jones was uncertain. "Grandma, please don't listen to Uncle Oliver." Matilda was the first to stand up and voice her opinion. "We're not even the richest family in Chicago, let alone the world. There's no way someone would approach us first. This has to be a scam." Oliver got upset with his niece and yelled, "Matilda, I'm talking with your grandmother. Please don't interrupt." Even though Oliver used to be one of the most respected members of the family, he was no longer Grandma Jones's favorite. A lot of the Joneses held a grudge against him. For one thing, they thought his son-in-law Kevin was a deadbeat. They also had a lot of unpleasant things to say about Dorothy and Lily lately. And to top it all off, Oliver had been out of the country for years. "I don't care what you think. This is a scam," Matilda protested. Then Kevin repeated his warning. "Dad, in my opinion, you really ought to think twice about this." When she heard this, Dorothy stood up from her seat, walked over to Kevin, and slapped him in the face. "What are you talking about? Don't you want this family to succeed? Just because you're a leech, it doesn't mean Lily's father is too. If you say another word, you will never be welcome in my home again," she shrieked. Kevin couldn't let it go, even after Dorothy's ultimatum. "But Mom, think about it. This is too good to be true. If it were this easy to make a fortune, nobody in the world would be poor." Dorothy gave Kevin a vicious slap on the other cheek, shouting, "That's it! Get out of here now!" Before Kevin could say anything else, Matilda interrupted him. "Uncle Oliver, you didn't come back home just to let the family get cheated out of millions, did you?" Suddenly, Jason had an idea. The way he saw the situation, Oliver's friend claimed he could triple their money in 10 days. Did he think that they were fools? Of course it would be easy to trick Grandma Jones out of her money. And at first, Jason wanted to speak out against the idea like Matilda had. But now he saw an opportunity to chase Lily out of the family and make some extra money for himself. Plus, Oliver was Kevin's father-in-law, and Jason hated Kevin to the core because of all the times he'd made him suffer. He couldn't pass up this chance to get even. So Jason sneered and said, "Matilda, Uncle Oliver has good intentions. How can you say his friend's offer is a fraud?" "Jason, what do you mean?" Grandma Jones said as she turned to look at him. Even though Jason had humiliated Brittany and almost cost the family a fortune, he was still Grandma's favorite. "Grandma, I think this is a good opportunity," Jason said respectfully. He had already come up with a plan. As long as Grandma listened to Oliver and invested the family's money, Jason would be able to funnel company money to his own bank account. This deal his uncle had found was definitely a scam. By the time the family realized all their funds had disappeared, it would look like Oliver was responsible. He and the rest of his immediate family, including Kevin, would be ostracized. Jason figured that nobody would suspect him. Then, once Kevin and Lily were out of the family, he would pay someone to track them down and punish them so he could finally get his revenge. "Jason, have you lost it? Can't you tell this is an obvious scam?" Matilda asked in disbelief. Kevin was about to say something, but Dorothy glared at him angrily, and Lily pulled on his sleeve. He decided to keep quiet for now. "Matilda, I think maybe you've lost it. You actually agree with Kevin?" Jason asked in a snotty tone. He continued, "I don't care what Kevin thinks. He doesn't know anything about business. But you're a Jones. You ought to know better." "It's because I'm a Jones that I'm against this," Matilda shot back angrily. "Matilda, what do you have against me?" Oliver said dejectedly. Matilda was about to say more, but Grandma Jones suddenly slammed her fist on the table. She first gave Kevin a fierce look and then said, "Enough! We're all family. What are you guys arguing about anyway? You sound ridiculous." Grandma Jones looked at Kevin again and her eyes were filled with contempt. What was she going to do now? While everyone watched anxiously, Grandma Jones took a deep breath and said, "I've decided to give all available family assets to Oliver for this investment." "Grandma," Matilda began to plead, but her grandmother interrupted her. "Don't say another word. Matilda, you must remember one thing. Above all else, you're a Jones." Oliver was the most excited one in the room. "Mother, don't worry. We'll easily earn at least $200 million, Oliver said happily. The next step was for Grandma to authorize the Jones family's chief financial officer to transfer every available asset to Oliver's account. As this was happening, Jason looked at his smartphone and smiled. Meanwhile, Kevin closed his eyes and shook his head helplessly.